How do you describe a feeling to somebody who has never felt it? It's an old problem, like describing a color to someone who has never seen. So we already know that we don't have the language, but I've gone looking for it anyway. Some single word that could hold what the 18th hour of a genuinely maximal effort actually feels like. It's a sound so accurate that your body would react just by hearing it, the way your mouth waters at the thought of biting into a lime. There isn't one. There's no word for the pain, no word for the haunting that arrives when it's just you, your effort, and the dark, in the hours when everybody else is asleep. And there's no word for what waits on the other side of that, either the thing that is almost bliss that shows itself once you've shed the last of your certainty. I can't give you the word, but I can tell you I've spent a long time in the country it belongs to. I found endurance before I ever found strength, long before. I raced triathlon, dozens of them. I won a few outright. I stood on a lot of podiums. I raced road bikes for the better part of a decade. I finished 100-mile gravel races. I've put thousands of hours into running, into riding trail, into rowing. I've even chased it out on a stand-up paddleboard on lakes and oceans. At one point, I set a world record for a 24-hour on the assault bike. All that being said, when I compare that next to the athletes I've coached, the people I've watched go truly deep, my own resume starts to look pretty much amateur. That is an intensely humbling perspective. The further into this you go, the more you understand how little of it that you've actually touched. The subject that we're talking about today is endurance. It's the thing I found first and the thing that has spent more than 20 years teaching me who I am. Here's what it taught me. We were built for this. The first thing that endurance taught me is that we've got the origin story backwards. Sports science likes to tell a story about our ancestors. It's a story about explosive power, about strength, agility, speed, as if our survival came down to muscular brute force, as if the first humans clubbed their way to the top of the food chain. It's a flattering story. It sells tons of programs and a ton of TRT, and it leaves out the part that actually explains why you're here. In 2004, two researchers, Dennis Bramble and Daniel Lieberman, published a paper in Nature arguing that our entire genus, Homo, was shaped by distance running, going back almost 2 million years. They found 26 traits in the human body that make almost no sense for just walking, and perfect sense for running long. Tendons in the leg and the foot that store and return energy like springs. A foot arch built to push off of things. Shoulders that rotate free of the head so we can stay balanced at speed. And the one big one, the ability to sweat, to shed heat while we continue moving. The chimpanzee is stronger than pretty much every human. Almost everything on the savannah is faster than you. We didn't win on strength and we didn't win on speed. We won because nothing could outlast us. There's a way of hunting that's still practiced, just barely, by the San people in central Kalahari. It's called persistence hunting. To preface this, anthropologists argue about how common this ever was. That argument is actually part of what makes it interesting. But the documented version goes like this. A hunter picks an antelope, a kudu, in the heat of the day, 40 degrees Celsius, and he doesn't sprint after it because he can't. The animal is faster every single time. He just trots, closes the distance slowly. The kudu bolts, gets ahead, stops to rest in the shade, and before it can cool down, the hunter is there again, moving it on. Because here's the thing that an animal can't do. It can't gallop and pant at the same time. It can't cool itself while it runs. So the human just keeps applying pressure for 2 hours, 3, 5, across 20, 30 kilometers, until the faster, stronger animal lies down and can't get up. That is the whole philosophy in what might be one of the most tortuous styles of hunting. The antelope chose intensity, the human chose duration, and duration won. This is the first thing I need you to understand, and everything else in this video sits on top of it. Intensity is the inverse of duration. They are not the same currency. You can't buy one with the other, and the entire modern fitness world is built on pretending that you can. So let's define it. When we see it, we know it, but knowing isn't the same as being able to describe it. We try to make endurance a thing, an it with edges, with a finish line defined by characteristics that a machine can interpret, data that identifies it. But humans keep surpassing these edges, so maybe it isn't a thing at all. Endurance is not a thing that you possess, it's a process inside of you. It moves within you and you can move with it. In my own experience, this is how I define it. It's the physical, mental, and emotional patience by which one bears the difficulty and keeps moving forward. We use time as the rough guideline. Physiologically, I've said endurance begins around the 90-minute mark. That's because that's when most people first hear the call to quit and when stored glycogen in the liver and the muscles becomes exhausted. This is the point when fuel and heat and hydration start to actually matter. Anybody can gut out the first hour. This is where I would inject my second definition. Endurance starts when you want to stop. We don't measure endurance by speed. The fastest person is just the fastest. Speed has endurance inside of it, sure, but only the longest lasting are the most enduring. As a side note to the absurdity and misunderstanding of the term, endurance competitions measure and rank the fastest, but the most enduring would be the ones that came in last. By this measure, poor endurance is just defining those who quit. Developing endurance builds a resistance to quitting, and that transfers to everything. It is the most portable quality a human being can train. Not stopping during any effort that matters is valuable in almost every corner of life. It might well be the only aspect that matters, that regardless of outcome, of circumstance, you refuse to quit. This is why I say fitness is not sport. Sport is a container we pour it into. The actual thing, the capacity to keep going, to take care of yourself well enough to keep going, to know the difference between the voice that wants to quit and the body that needs to stop. That's not athletics, that's survival, that's character. We treat the aerobic system like a wellness accessory, a box to tick, the fat burning zone, something tertiary to real fitness. For most of human history, it was infrastructure. It was the most important technology a civilization had. 3 empires, none of them ran their most urgent messages on horses or wheels. They ran them on legs. The Mexica had professional couriers, relayed messages something like 100 leagues a day. They maintained the very roads that they ran on. Running was so central to that world, it had its own art, its own discipline. That same culture gave us a word I keep coming back to, ollin, or properly pronounced ayin. It means movement, but not random motion, meaningful movement, change with purpose. They believe the present age of the world is held up by it and ends the day it stops. Hold on to that one because I'm going to come back to it. The Inca wired together an empire across 40,000 kilometers of road. The Kapaknan, with relay runners called Chaski, a runner approaches the station and blows a conch shell. The next runner comes out and runs alongside him, stride for stride, and the message passes between them in motion. Perhaps our first look at zone 2, or what we would call conversational pace. Then the fresh one takes off. A message could move 240 kilometers in a day. Quito to Cusco, 2,000 kilometers in about a week. The system covered the distance by handing off sustainable efforts, one after the other, stride for stride. That is accumulation over intensity, built into the architecture of an empire. And the Greeks had the day runners, professional messengers who'd cover 100 miles in a day over brutal terrain. You know one of them, even if you don't know. Pheidippides, we remember him as the man who ran the first marathon and dropped dead, except that is a myth. The actual account from Herodotus is that Pheidippides ran about 240 kilometers, 150 or so miles, from Athens to Sparta to ask for help against the Persians, and he lived. So think about which version we kept. We kept the one where endurance kills you. We threw away the one where it carries you 150 miles and then brings you home again. That choice tells you everything about what our culture believes about going long. And it wasn't only logistics. For a lot of people, it was sacred. The Tarahumara of northern Mexico, their name means roughly the light-footed. They have a race called Rarapari, where the men run while kicking a wooden ball for miles, for hours, sometimes for days, village against village. But before the race, there's a ceremony, and the entire point of the ceremony is to remind the runners that they are not running for themselves. They're running for the village, for the people who came before. So with unity and for purpose, they run. We turned running into a stopwatch and an event that you get a medal at. They kept it as a prayer. On Mount Hiei in Japan, there are Tendai Buddhist monks who undertake something called the kaihōgyō, 1,000 days of running spread across 7 years as a path to enlightenment. Not training for something else, and running is the practice. And at the very center of it, after the 700th day, there's a trial called the Dori. 7.5 days with no food, no water, no sleep, sitting upright, chanting. The first 700 days are for the self. The last 300 are for everybody else. Fewer than 50 men have completed it in the last 140 years. The ones who do are called living saints. They built a religion around the thing that you feel at hour 12, and that most modern humans can't be bothered to do or outright have scorn for. There are even older, stranger accounts. The Longompa of Tibet, monks said to run for days in a trance, sustained by breath and a single mantra, eyes fixed on one distant point. A French explorer claimed to watch one in 1924, moving across the plateau in long, elastic bounds, like a bouncing ball, his face completely still. I'm not telling you that that's documented physiology. It isn't, it's legend. But every endurance athlete recognizes the doorway that it's describing. You find the tempo, the negotiating voice goes quiet, and something else takes over the driving. And in Australia, the Aboriginal Songlines, sung maps that encode the routes of ancestral beings across the land, sing the song in the right order, and you can navigate 1,000 kilometers of desert. The walkabout, a young person travels that land alone for weeks or months as the rite that makes them an adult. It is a test of endurance and self-knowledge in the same act of moving through the world. Notice what runs through all of these. The runner is the connective tissue. He connects the village to the gods, the message to the empire, the self to the land, and the young to the grown. Across every continent, endurance wasn't recreation and it wasn't aesthetics. It was how you belong to something larger than yourself. So how did we go from that to a treadmill in a dark room with a screen on it? We got seduced. The marketing arm of the fitness industry made a promise, more for less, short, hard, intense, the same result as long as slow in a fraction of the time. It's called optimization. It's big bang for your buck. And it produced a very specific, very predictable kind of broken athlete. I call it the intensity deficiency. Sharp on the top, hollow underneath. A high VO2 max sitting on top of no aerobic base. Great for 20 minutes, falls apart at 60. A tall, skinny pyramid with nothing holding it up. Here's why it happens. And it's not really physiology, it's psychology. We've been taught not to trust easy effort. Slow work doesn't look like work. There's no sweat angel on the floor, no collapsed heap at the end, no drama, so people push harder because hard is legible to those you want to impress. Hard looks like something is happening. But slowing down and going long is, in this culture, a rebellious act, and you will find very little support for it. Let me give the actual framework because I don't want to leave you with philosophy and no map. There are 3 traps: training too hard, training too easy, and the one almost everybody falls into, which is training too much in the middle, this gray zone. Too hard to recover from, too easy to actually sharpen you. Most people do whatever feels most satisfying, which is almost never the thing that's weak. It takes real discipline to train your weaknesses because training your strength feels good and confronting your weakness does the opposite. The research, Stephen Seiler's work, points to roughly 80% of your volume done easy, around 65% of VO2 max, and the other 20% done genuinely hard. Most people invert that. They do everything at a medium hard simmer and wonder why they never change. So how do we know what easy even is without a lab? It's a fair question. There's a few tools: conversational pace, nasal breathing. Those are fine entry cues. They get you into the neighborhood. Then there's the MAF test. Phil Maffetone's 180 minus your age gives you a rough ceiling for your aerobic heart rate. And the simplest gut check I know, at any point in any easy effort, you should be able to double it. Double the duration without radically changing your pace or how you're taking care of yourself. If you can't double it, you're going too hard. And one more thing about the number, because this is where most people fail. A test result is not a verdict, it's a coordinate. It tells you where you are on the map, not who you are. The math number doesn't tell you what you want to hear, it tells you the truth, and the discipline is training from that, not from the number you posted last year, not from your training partner's number. If the pace it gives you feels embarrassingly slow and you speed up just to feel better about yourself, you're not navigating anymore, you're just performing. Now, I want to tell you the thing that took me 20 years to be able to say clearly, because this is what's changed most in how I think about all of it. Underneath all the physiology, endurance is a relationship with yourself. And the word for what you're building is trust. Trust is the balance of two forces that look like opposites, but are actually inseparable. The first is discipline. It's the willingness to keep going when the voice in your head starts negotiating, when the excuses show up dressed as logic. The second is self-care. It's the ability to tell the difference between the mind's protest and the body's genuine signal, and to respect the signal. One without the other doesn't work. Discipline without care is how people break themselves. Care without discipline is how they never start. Real endurance is built in the narrow space where the two meet, and you build it the way you build trust with another person, through consistency, honesty, and of course, through time. You show up, you listen to your body before you ask anything of it. You give it what it needs: sleep, fuel, patience, and then you ask it to go a little further than it went before. And when it answers, you listen again. This reframed something for me. I used to have a scale I'd use, 3 levels of effort: just go, try, and try hard. And for years, I thought just go was the bottom rung, the throwaway easy day. I had it backwards. Just go is the highest expression of trust there is. To show up with no plan, no target, no number to validate the session, and let your body lead the effort. Most people can't do that. They need the security of a goal to feel like the work counted for something. The scale doesn't go from easy to hard, it goes from trust to control. Just go is governed by feel. Try adds a plan. Try hard demands prediction. And none of the upper levels work if you've never built the trust at the bottom. So let me tell you about the moment it matters most. Somewhere between halfway and 3/4 of any long effort, there's a revolt. Your mind runs the numbers and concludes you can't make it. And here's the uncomfortable part. Based on the evidence it has, it might be right. It's not lying to you, it just can't account for what you've never done. I learned this on the assault bike, of all places. 24 hours, somewhere in the dark, well past halfway, my mind did the math and told me calmly and reasonably that the body on the bike was not going to finish. And it had a case. But I'd been to that exact place enough times in enough other efforts that I knew the math was incomplete. So I didn't argue with it. I asked a smaller question instead. Can I turn the cranks for 1 more minute? And when that minute was done, I asked again. For 14 hours of a 24-hour effort, I just looked at doing 1 minute at a time. That was the only chunk of time I could trust myself with. That gap between what the evidence says and what's actually possible, that gap is exactly what trust fills. When you've banked enough efforts where you hit that same wall and come through intact, the math changes. Not because it got easier, because the evidence base got bigger. You survived before, the body remembers, even when the mind forgets. So the self-talk that works isn't, you've got this. It isn't affirmation, it's inquiry. Can I be more efficient right now? Can I relax my shoulders and hold the pace? You're putting the mind in charge of curiosity about the body, which is where it belongs, not in charge of demanding things from the body that it can't even communicate with. So what is on the other side of all of this? Because it's not a medal and it's not a number. Short, hard efforts, strength, power, they enliven the self. Victory is loud and triumphant. The ego gets bigger. Endurance does the opposite. Go far enough, long enough, and it starts to take the self apart. That dissolution people talk about deep in a long effort, it's not mystical. It's what happens when the conscious mind, exhausted from hours of arguing, finally stops fighting the body and starts cooperating with it. You give it water when it asks, you slow when it needs slowing, you keep going when the mind has simply lost interest, because you've learned from every effort that came before this one that the body can continue even after the mind checks out. And what's underneath when enough of the self has been stripped away? It's love. Love is acceptance. It's feeling pain and going anyway. We endure the same way we learn to love, not by reading about it, but by experiencing it. We can often do for others what we can't even do for ourselves because of love, and there isn't quite anything like endurance to show us this universal concept. There will never be a day when you have endurance. It doesn't work like that. There will be a day you express it well, and then many days that you fall short. The practice is the whole point, which brings me back to that word, ollin. Meaningful movement, the motion that holds up the world, that ends the day that it stops. The Mexica weren't talking about a workout. They were talking about being alive, that to exist at all is to keep moving with purpose, in balance through the parts that hurt. We were built for more than strength. We were built to endure, to go long, to take care of ourselves well enough to go longer, and to find out somewhere out past the place we wanted to quit who we actually are. So show me yourself after 12 hours of continuous effort, and I won't need to tell you who you are. The pain you walked through already exposed you.